Dear student, welcome to French Defense chapter. In this chapter, we are going to learn how to play against e4, e6. And it is a very tough opening, and there is a lot of theory. And definitely, this is one of the most common openings. It is very healthy. It is one of the best openings to play for black. So, if you want to study a good opening for black, you can definitely study e6. But in this course, we are mainly focusing on white. So we are going to cover from the white side. And what I'm recommending is to play d4, d5, and here e takes d5. Now, there are a lot of moves here. Knight c3 is a move, knight d2 is a move, e5 is a move, bishop d3 even is a move. And all these moves are very interesting, and there is a lot of theory. And ED is very interesting as well. I think it's a very modern approach. And it used to have this reputation among the amateur level players that when you take ED, you just want to make a draw. But now it's not really the case. ED is a very interesting move, and you will see that even though the position is symmetrical after ED, you can really put some pressure on black, and black really needs to be very precise in order to equalize the game. So let's get into it. ED, ED, and knight f3. And here, black has a lot of options. So let's start from the ones that are not very common. So bishop g4. Well, in fact, it's a common move in online games, but it is not the main move. The main moves are knight f6 and bishop d6 and knight f6. I believe these are the main moves. So bishop g4, h3. Well, now giving up two bishops does not really make sense. So black needs to go back to h5. And now a very strong move, queen e2 check. Now, as you can see, I pointed out the idea. Now, if you, as black, go knight e7 or bishop e7, white will simply give queen b5 check, and with the next move, will capture on b7. So for that reason, queen e7 is the only move here. Bishop e3, yes, we do want to avoid trading queens. Now, our idea is to go knight c3 and long castle. Knight c6, same. Black also wants to do the same. And here, g4, bishop g6, and knight c3. Well, why g4? Because now if knight c3, there is possibility of bishop f3. And after queen f3, there is knight d4. I believe that this is also fine somehow for white. But just to make it less complicated, I'm recommending you to go g4 first, bishop g6 and knight c3, attacking d5 pawn and preparing long castle. Now, if long castle, we go long castle. And now it is a very important moment here because the most common move here is knight f6. But in fact, it's losing because of knight e5. Very strong move now. Black is unable to capture on e5 since, you will just take on e5 and queen e5 will push f4 and f5 and we will trap this bishop on g6. So, and well, that means that black cannot capture on e5. And if they don't capture on e5, we will just push f4. And again, f5 is a huge threat and we will get this strong knight on e5 and with a very good position. So that's the reason why knight f6 is not good. And in general, after long castle, I do want to go here knight e5. So that's why f6 is the best move. It prevents knight e5 and also plans to put the bishop on f7. And yeah, it's a bit solid approach. But in this position, white gets an advantage because we have more space with knight d1. Very strong move, just an excellent move. The idea is to reroute the pieces. Basically, now we want to put the bishop on g2 and knight on d3. And in the future, we also plan to push f4 and f5. And in this case, as we see, the pieces are not active. And because of this f6 pawn, black cannot really get the knight to e4, where black would really like to get the knight to e4, but it is simply not possible. So after knight e1, white is doing extremely well. And I think, just to summarize this line, I think the most important move in this line is to remember that you should go h3 first. And here, queen e2 check is very important because I think I have faced this move a couple of times and I did not recall the move, and I played bishop e2, I believe. Well, I do not remember if I won the game or I drew, but definitely bishop e2 is not an ambitious move at all, and you should go queen e2 because you force queen e7 and then bishop e3, and this is already a very dynamic position, and it is not even close to be symmetrical because here, as we see, there is no symmetry. If black tries to get the symmetry with knight f6, then knight e5 is almost winning. So that's why bishop g4 is not a great move. It is a very common move, especially in online, because usually amateur level players, they used to pin the knight always with bishop g4 or bishop g5. So it is definitely very helpful to know why bishop g4 is not good. Now let's get to bishop f5, another interesting move. I don't think it's a bad move. I think it's quite a solid move, but I think for a moment it's not really necessary for black to develop the c8 bishop. So bishop d3, we are not against the trading these bishops. Takes queen d3, and it's a really interesting position. Now what we wanted to play with white is queen b5 check, and again b7 is hanging. So again, knight f6, queen b5 check, so we win a pawn. So knight c6 is the way to go. Now black is usually trying to play bishop d6 in these positions and bring the knight to e7. So castles, and now if knight f6, then it's a bit passive because after check, black will need to go bishop e7. So for that reason, bishop d6, rook e1 check, knight e7, and knight c3. Now there is a clear threat. We just want to capture on d5, short castle, and knight b5. Now, if we manage to take on d6 with the knight, then we will usually those structures are good for white because you simply have it's better combination when you have dark square bishop or actually light square bishop and the knight against two knights. It's almost, I would say, 95% of the time with this structure, when only e file is open, it is always good to have bishop and the knight against two knights rather than two knights versus two knights. So in this case, knight g6 is only move because there is no way to escape from knight d6. Well, technically, black can go bishop b4, but c3, bishop a5, and this bishop will not have any future on a5. So definitely not worth it. So knight g6 is the move, knight d6, queen d6, and h4. Now, h4 is a very good move, just preparing h5 for the future, rook e8 and bishop d2. And now you can see what are the common ideas. Let's start from g3, king g2. It's just a common way to improve your position slowly. Also, g3 is covering the f4 square. So if you feel like after h5, there is knight f4 at some point, in this case, after h5, knight f4, you will have queen f5. So you will be able to attack the knight. But I would recommend to start with g3 because knight on f4 can also land the check on e2. and you need to calculate some tactics there, such as rook e2, for example, I don't know, h6. Let's say here knight e2 check, now d4 is hanging, so you need to calculate some stuff like this, but it's just not worth it because you can go g3 and then cover f4 square, and then you can push h5. Another idea, as you can see, is queen b5 and queen b3. It is a very common, I would say it is a very common thing to just watch out, because, for example, now if you go queen b5, the only way to protect is with the rook or just by pushing the pawn. If you protect with the rook, there is always rook e8, and then I can take on b7. So basically, the idea of this queen b3 and queen b5 is weakening the queen side by forcing black to go b6. So it is definitely very close to an equal position. Basically, you should not be surprised if this position will end in a draw, but I would say that white is definitely better, and it is much easier to play as white. Black cannot simply force a draw, so white is always going to push. And I think the main idea, what you should focus on, is playing g3 and focusing on this knight, because you really want to play h5 and then h6 at some point, and also gaining the space. So this is about the bishop f5 line. It is very straightforward. I think you just need to remember about knight c3. It is a very direct move because you force black to go short castle, and knight b5, you already get what you want. Again, as a reminder, it is better. Let me show you here. It is always better in these structures to have knight bishop versus two knights, because you are simply more flexible with the bishop and the knight combination than with two knights. So definitely these positions are always good. And it does not matter whether your bishop is on c1 or on d3. I think personally, I would prefer even to have a light square bishop and the knight, but this is also very good. Now, let's cover knight c6. This is a very interesting move. Definitely one of the best moves, actually, in this position. The idea is to prepare a long castle maybe at some point. So black can also try to go bishop f5 or bishop g4 and queen d7 and long castle at some point. So it's a typical idea in French defense. And it is also avoiding the symmetrical structure, because in this case, yes, it is still symmetrical structure, but with knight c6, you show that you want to fight and you want to get a game. And with our next move, we also show that we are not here to just make a draw. We are here to challenge our opponent. And that move is bishop b5, a very interesting move. And in fact, it leads to a very sharp game. So let's have a look at a6. This move has been played a lot by a German grandmaster, a very strong grandmaster, Matthias Bluebaum. Well, to be honest, I don't think it's a very good move. I think bishop d6 is much better, but it's definitely an interesting choice. So we take bishop c6, b takes c6, and we go short castle. Now, black needs to develop bishop d6. And as you can see, c6, I pointed out c6 because it's weak pawn. And also black needs to develop bishop d6 because you want to go knight e7 and protect c6, and also just avoid this rook e1 check. So for example, if here knight f6, I would be able to give a check here, and then knight e5 and c6 hanging. Now you have to protect c6. So it's definitely not what black wants to achieve. Bishop d6, and here a very strong move, and probably the most important move in this position that you have to really memorize, because if you play something casual, such as rook e1 check, you will not get an advantage. And that move is knight e5, a very strong move. Now, if knight e7, Well, a very logical move. Black just wants to go short castle and f6, just making sure that the knight on e5 will not be there forever. And here we play another strong move, bishop g5. As you see, this is already very sharp, and this is not drawish line whatsoever. Now, what's our threat? We want to capture on c6 or on e7, depends. Now, if f6, I will give you some time to find the tactic here. The move is bishop f6. Yes, exactly. G takes, queen h5, and if king f8, well, we'll deliver a checkmate. If knight g6, we'll just take on g6, and that position is hopeless. So here, the only move to make is bishop b7. This move occurred in a game between Maxim Vachill-Lagrave and Bluebaum. Bishop e7. In order to avoid pin, black will need to take with the bishop, and knight d2. Now, as you see, the idea is to bring knight b3, and then we will have these jumps to c5 or a5. And bishop on b7 is not great, even though now black has two bishops advantage. It's not really working because we have two knights advantage. So the position is closed, and the b7 bishop is really not that great. So white is definitely holding a great advantage. And also, I think that most likely black will stop knight a5 with a5 move at some point. I'm just showing you an example what can happen potentially. You will still go knight b3, and you will put the knight on c5, because after bishop c5 dc, we are left with the position where your knight is better than your opponent's bishop. Because as you see, b7 bishop does not do much. All what you have to do is to make sure that you will not lose c5 pawn. And also you can play queen d4, or you can also transfer your knight to d4, again, just to make sure that you will not lose the c5 pawn. That's the only thing that I'm asking you. Because if you lose the c5 pawn, then the b7 bishop will eventually become very strong. So again, knight b3, knight c5 is your idea. And in this position, white is better. Well, but there is bishop e5, d takes c5, and as you see now, c5 and d4 squares are extremely weak. And after knight e7, bishop e3, taking control over these squares, short castle, bishop c5. It's a very nice bishop, in fact. Rook e8, just making sure that knight f5 or knight g6 is possible. f4. And now we are planning to improve our control over these squares with knight d2 and knight b3. The knight should develop to d2 because the knight on c3 does not do much. So we should go knight d2, knight b3, and then we can see how the game goes. But basically, our point is to make sure that we always keep control under these squares. And if you ask me where should I put my queen and the rook, I would say to put the queen on e2 or d2. I would suggest probably d2 and bring the rook to e1. And that position is simply dominating. White is just because white is controlling these squares, black has no counterplay. So definitely bishop e5 is, I think, one of the best moves, but I don't think this line is great for black. So that's why I think we should be very happy to face a6. So bishop d6. Now, this is clearly the right way of developing with black. The idea is to bring the knight to e7 and go currently, because of bishop e5, black does change the plan. And now they are aiming to go bishop d6, knight e7, and go for short castle. But now we are starting our short game with c4. This move stops knight e7 because now if knight ge7, then we will go c5 and the bishop will be trapped, and we will thank our opponent for a nice gift. So here, knight f6 is an option. I don't think I don't think anyone will really play this move, but let's cover it. Why not? C5, bishop e7, forcing bishop to go back, takes, and knight e5. And as you see, the c5 and d4 pawns are extremely strong. This bishop is out of the game right now. This pawn is extremely weak. We can also attack the c6 pawn with queen a4, and white is simply better. For that reason, here the move is dc. In fact, dc is the only move that is, well, let's put it this way, not getting worse for black. d5 and a6. This is still a theory, and I believe that one of the moves here is bishop a4, but in this chapter, I'm covering bishop c4 only. It's very natural. And now it seems that it's not a very sharp position after 95, for example, but trust me, it is incredible, getting very sharp. So 95 takes, and short castle. Now we want to go rook e1. Very simple idea. We just want to win a piece. And now let's start from bishop h2. Just in case if your opponent tries to be creative, just tell them not to be, because after king h2, queen h4 check, king g1, queen c4, rook e1 check, knight e7, and here very strong move, just b3, and after bishop a3, we will win e7, knight, and we will win the game. Well, in case your opponent goes queen g4, do not go bishop a3 immediately. You can capture on g4 and then go bishop a3, or probably f3 and then bishop a3. So now there is also another interesting move, queen h4. Now you may think that the move here is f4, and f4 is a move, but it's not a very good move. h3, very strong move, very interesting move, sacrificing a bishop. Well, in fact, at the moment for nothing. So queen c4, rook e1. Now I want to capture on e5, and once I capture on e5, well, if black goes knight f6, then after rook e5 check, black is lost because there is no way for black to castle. They are losing the right of castling, and black king will be in the center for the rest of the game. So f6 is the only move not to lose. Again, let me show you knight e7 as well. After rook e1, sorry, after rook e5, there is queen e1, and also the same idea with b3 and bishop a3, and white is winning. So f6 is the only move. f4, very interesting. Now we are getting the piece back. Now knight e7 is the strongest move in this position. Other moves are just leading into a very bad position. For example, after f takes, queen d5 is a possibility, but queen d5 takes, e takes, king here takes, and very quiet move, b3. It's a very nice idea, actually. Usually in these lines, you always have to watch out when your opponent is playing a bit sketchy for this b3, bishop a3, bishop b2 ideas. So in this case, even though the material is equal, white's game is very easy. Black's king is extremely weak. So after bishop b2 check in the future, we will bring the knight with knight d2 and knight f3 into a game, and we'll try to create an attack into our opponents. And with getting knight to f3, we basically achieve the perfect setup. So definitely a very good position to have, and we are managing to develop pretty quickly. Just make sure that you keep at least one rook in the game, because if you trade both rooks, then you cannot use the fact that black's king is extremely weak. So it is also very important to watch out. For example, after now we have a threat, bishop b2. But for example, if black makes such moves, it is important to watch out for rook e5, also attacking both pieces at the same time. So you have to be very alert tactically as well in this position, because if you let your opponent to somehow exchange rooks, and then it will be a very drawish position, because this position is very direct, you are about to give a very dangerous check to your opponent, and then you bring the knight very quickly to the game. That's the reason why white is doing very well. So just make sure that you are very alert tactically. Well, the best move here is short castle. I believe it's really hard to find. It takes on f6, and if knight d5, we just takes, and queen h5, and black's king is way too exposed. Now bishop h6 is coming, and black simply does not have any counterplay. But the move here is very hard to find. It is rook f6, sacrificing a piece. Now, well, we are happy to take a free piece, and bishop h3, another very strong sacrifice. Again, all these moves, now if black does not take on h3 or on f6 here, black is losing. So it is very important to understand that all these moves are not obvious at all. Now, for example, queen c5 may be obvious for somebody, but here you just go back and you win the game. So bishop h3, taking is not good, because after rook a f8, the black attack is really dangerous actually. So that's why we go knight c3. And after let's say rook e f8, we go bishop g5. And now, if rook f1 check, we will capture on f1. And in that position, we will have two rooks, one piece, and the h3 is also hanging, and we'll have a mating idea since our rook will be on f1 and you will have no rooks left. So in that position, black is losing. So rook g6 is the only move, but again, knight d4, a very quiet move, and now white is managing to stay up a piece. With the next move, we can go rook c1 and capture on c7. So currently h3 is hanging, and there are no more tricks for black. So here there is also rook g6. I think this is the most logical approach. Rook e2. And here again, the only move here for black is bishop g4, pinning our rook. Queen e1, takes, and after rook e8, knight f4, rook f6, bishop d2. Well, I believe that this position is equal, but equal from computer's perspective. From a human point of view, I think it is much easier to play with two pieces against one rook and one pawn. And in this case, we have this strong pawn on d5, and we can play with rook c1 and attacking on c7. And even if we exchange one pair of rooks, there again, white is the one who is pushing for a win. And it is very important to remember that finding all these moves is incredibly hard, especially if you are playing someone who is not a grandmaster, and if you are playing blitz game, I would say this is nearly impossible. But there is also bishop g2, which is again leading to a position which is very complicated. Again, according to the computer, it's equal, but I would say that in the end, white is the one who is pushing for a win, and queen e2 here, and they are already up in material, and queen trade is only beneficial for us. Now king g2 is losing because of queen h4, I believe. So queen e2, queen h4, only move again. By the way, it is not an easy move to find, and we capture on g2 and rook g6. Now rook e4 back, since Well, I'm sorry. Both pieces are hanging, so we need to make sure that we don't lose queen and the rook at the same time. So rook e4 takes, queen h5, bishop f4, rook f8, and rook ae1. And as we see, we have 3 pieces against the queen, and there is no way for black to give perpetual. The bishop on g3 is always going to be very strong, covering all the checks around. And basically now I would say the main idea that white should focus on is to bring the rook from e1 to e3 to make sure that even queen f3 is not an option in the future. Although if let's say black goes g5, bishop g3, queen f3, there is no perpetual because we'll go here, and when black goes back, we'll just go king g1 and there are no more checks. So I would say that this is the idea what white should try to do. Rook bring to e3 and then bishop back to g3, making sure that king is safe. And then later on, we can try to go rook e7 and just play on weaknesses, such as, for example, g7 pawn or c7 pawn. I think we should also be very happy to trade one pair of rooks, because then I think it will be an easy win for us, because our king is currently not very safe. But that's why I'm suggesting this rook e3, bishop g3. But once the rooks are gone, you just have to make sure that there is no perpetual, and at some point this c7 pawn will fall and we will win the game. So I think according to the computer, this position is equal, but I think from human point of view, it is much easier to play with 3 pieces, because your opponent can give a couple of nonsense checks, and that will be it. So for example, here queen g4, we'll just go here, check, and we can go king g1, and with the next move you just go rook e3 and there are no more checks. So I believe that it is much easier to play with white. All you have to know is this just rook e3 idea and with bishop g3, and later on it will be much easier for you to play, because you basically achieve the perfect setup and then you have to go after the pawns. So it is also, this line is definitely one of the best to play for black, but also we have to understand that it is very hard to make all these moves. It is very hard, for example, here to go short castle. Like, if you look at it, it is very natural to capture this, but after this, again, we have this ideas queen e1, sorry, b3 and bishop a3, and well, also in this case, bishop g5 is also a possibility, and white is simply winning. And it is very important to know that if your opponent is playing like this, they are either genius or there is something suspicious. So that's why it's better to be ready. And yeah, you just have to remember that bishop g2, you go queen e2, not king g2, and after rook a f8, bishop g5 is winning, and after rook g6, it's rook e2 to save the g2 pawn, and here black is forced to go to this position, which is, I believe, slightly worse. So that's about the queen h4 line. Again, just to summarize, I think it is very likely that you will win the game very quickly here, or at least you will get a very good position, because these moves are not easy. From a human point of view, it is very likely that black can go just knight e7, give this bishop back, and then it is simply impossible to stop b3 and bishop a3. So it is definitely possible to win a game very quickly like this. And there is another move, knight e7. It's probably practically the best decision because it's a lot more safer. Rook e1, bishop d6 back, knight c3, castle, and knight e4. Again, we are aiming to capture on d6 and get 2 bishops advantage. Our idea is to also go bishop g5. So bishop e5, just the developing move. Knight d6, queen d6, and queen f3. And white is slightly better because of the c7 weakness. We have two bishops advantage, and I think that our game plan is very easy. We just want to bring the bishop to f4, and then rook to c1, and then go bishop back to b3. And the only thing that we have to make sure that we won't lose the d5 pawn. So that's why we can also play at some point rook ed1 and then rook ac1. But white is definitely better, and this is, I would say, a risk-free position. So you are just pushing as long as you want. And if you want to make a draw, I think it should not be very hard, but definitely this position is very comfortably better for white. But if we compare knight e7 and queen h4, I think in case of queen h4, black can lose very quickly if they don't know what they are doing. But after knight e7, they just get a slightly worse position where white is just not winning a piece or nothing like that, but white just has a very comfortable edge. So that's why knight e7 is probably the best here for black. But again, from practical point of view, but if they know what they are doing, queen h4 is definitely the best, because this is very dangerous for white as well if you don't remember. So you have to be very careful and to remember all the lines, because if you do not remember anything in this position, you can lose very quickly. For example, it is very important to remember queen e2 here. And but after queen e2, yes, the only important thing left is to remember this rook e3 idea and bishop g3, and then you'll be fine. So this line with 95 is definitely very sharp. It can lead to very unexpected positions, but it's definitely something that black needs to be ready for before the game, to analyze and to be prepared so they can make all these brilliant moves. But I think it's really less likely. I think it's just most likely after castle, you will get a good position very quickly. In fact, I had this position a couple of times, and to be honest, my opponents did not even go for queen h4. I do not know what's the reason, but they mostly went for knight e7. And then it's actually quite easy to play. You just attack to the bishop, and then knight c3 and knight e4. You just take the bishop and you enjoy your game with two bishops. So there is also knight c7. There is also queen e7 check. Let's start from queen e7 check. It is a very healthy move. And now we should go back and knight e5. Short castle, knight f6, and rook e1. This is pretty straightforward, actually. Queen e7 check is really straightforward. And after castle, we go bishop f4. And black has many options here. One is knight f3, and another is rook e8. So let's start with knight f3. We just take queen d8, we capture on d6, queen d6, and knight d2. And white holds a slight advantage. Now the idea is to go, well, first of all, let's start with knight d5. It is impossible to take because after knight c4, d5 and d6 is hanging. And our plan is also very straightforward. We just want to go knight c4, rook c1, and push d6, open up this bishop's diagonal, and also make sure that the bishop on c8 will be stuck because it needs to defend b7, and we will get piece activity. In case you do not really want to go d6, you can always go knight to e3, for example, and protect d5, and then go rook c1 and queen c2, put pressure on c7 pawn. In these structures, as you saw already a couple of times, it is very common that our d5 pawn needs to be protected, and we put pressure on c7 pawn. But I believe that in this case, our main focus should be on knight c4, rook c1, and d6, trying to open up the bishop's diagonal. And even though it is very symmetrical, it will be a symmetrical pawn structure there. By what I'm saying is that we will have 3 here against 3 and 2 here against 2, but our pieces are will be more active because the bishop here is dominating this bishop and b7 is hanging. So that's why I think that this position is slightly better for white. And again, it's a risk-free game. I think the ideas are quite easy to remember. You just have to go rook c1 and knight c4, and then you will see whether you can push d6 or you can just go knight d3 and protect the pawn and put pressure on the c file. There is also another move, rook e8, and now knight e5, bishop e5, bishop f3. Well, here black needs to find only move, queen d6, rook e5, and knight d2. We are not rushing to capture on e5 because now we want to go knight c4. So for that reason, black needs to give this check. It's not easy, by the way. So queen e1 here and rook c1. And now it's actually a very deep idea here. Again, it's a d5 pawn against c7 pawn. Now, if we had the d4 pawn here, then black would very comfortably push c6 and we will have isolated pawn. But in this case, it is hard to say which pawn is the strongest because I believe that it is d5 pawn because the c7 is always hanging. Now, it is very important to know that our plan here is to go queen e3. And if you see now, after queen e3, queen trade, black cannot stop us from taking on c7. I mean, the only move actually is knight e8, but then we will have this pawn to e3, and then we will push e4 and e5, and we will have very strong center with e5 and d5 pawns. So our plan is to go queen e3 with the next move. Doesn't matter what our opponent does. And if black does not trade, then we can go queen c5 or queen c3 and keep putting pressure on c7 pawn. So definitely, even though this is the position is seems like it's very dry, but I believe that white can put some pressure, especially in a blitz game. I think it's quite easy. All you have to know is that your idea is to go queen e3 with the next move. And for example, when you go queen e3, your opponent needs to go queen d6, and then you have knight c4, again another move with the tempo. And after knight c4, you can watch out for d6, cd, knight b6 ideas. So definitely, this seems like a bit boring position, but it's not really the case when you know that you are supposed to go queen e3. So I believe that white is slightly better here. Of course, if you play against the computer, I believe that computer will manage to equalize, but definitely for a human's perspective, it is quite comfortable here to play as white. So that's about the queen e7 check, and there is knight ce7 as well. This is probably the most natural and most solid approach from black's perspective. Short castle, knight f6, and bishop g5. This is very important to play this move, and because with this move, we stop black from comfortable development. Basically, let's imagine if we went knight c3, short castle, bishop g5, and now black will have knight g6. Now, what's the difference? The difference is that after bishop g5, if black decides to go knight g6, we give this check, and now there is no way for black to castle. After bishop e7, we'll capture this, and black will be forced to capture with the g-pawn and get this horrible pawn structure. So there is no better way for black other than going for short castle here. Now, it is not easy to make such decision, but it's not very bad. I mean, it's not as bad as it looks because of bishop f6, but we have to take bishop f6, takes queen d4, attacking the f6 pawn. But as you can see that here after knight g6, black is managing to defend this pawn very comfortably from queen on d8 and knight d2. Now we want to go knight e4 and black goes f5, stopping knight e4. And here it's a very important moment because if we do not play the move, what I recommend, I believe that it's actually not very hard for black to play because they will just go bishop d7, rook e8, and later on probably try to exchange some pieces and get to a drawish position. So here I think it's very important to go rook e1, as you see, with the idea to go knight f1, knight g3, and knight h5. We need to use our advantage, and our advantage is that the queen here is extremely strong. It controls this square, these squares, and basically after putting the knight on h5, we will have access to knight f6 and queen g7. So that's what we want to achieve. And this is the main idea, to bring the knight to h5. And I believe that after rook fe1, white really has a very good chances to win the game. So let's say if your opponent goes bishop d7, knight f1, now you want to go knight to g3. And it is very likely that your opponent will go f4 because they also want to stop knight g3. And now you can be very smart and you can go back, and now you get e4 square. And again, now you also attack to d6, because if you take knight d6, then the only advantage that black has, which is two bishops, will also disappear. And also you want to give knight f6 check, and you get this e4 square in general for your play. So definitely be aware of this idea. So if your opponent stops you from going knight g3, don't be like, oh, what am I supposed to do now? No, keep your calm and go knight b d2. And if your opponent decides to stop knight e4 as well with f5, then guess what? You get the d4 square and e6 square for your knight. So you can probably go queen c3, knight d4, knight d6. And this is really bad for black because there are a lot of weaknesses. You can go knight d4, the other knight to f3. So definitely this is not the way for black to play. And I believe that after rook fe1, it is just important to know these ideas, that after knight f1, you want to go knight g3 and knight h5. And if your opponent goes to f4, you just go back and you grab the e4 square. So this is about the knight e7 move. And I believe that this was it about knight c6. Definitely a very interesting move. There are a lot of sharp lines, a lot of positions where you have to be very positionally very alert to understand that you should put pressure on c7 pawn. I believe that if you ask my opinion, I think it's very likely that you will get this position with dc, d5, a6, bishop c4, and knight c7. This is why I covered this as a main line. So I believe that most of the games, if your opponent goes for knight c6, will happen this way: castle, knight f6, and bishop g5. So definitely make sure that you remember this line very well, because I believe that this is the main line that will happen in your game. So let's go into, knight f6. Well, clearly we are playing something symmetrical, and it is very logical that our opponent can play the same moves, right? So bishop d3, and there are a couple of moves. Let's start from bishop e7. I think it's I mean, some people play like this, but I don't really understand what's the point. I mean, if you can develop to d6, which seems far more active, why you want to develop to e7? We just go castle, castle, h3. We are following the same plan as we are going to cover after bishop d6. Just let me show you very quickly. It is going to be h3 here as well, and you will see what is happening there later on. So castle, h3, rook e8. We just go rook e1, knight d7. Now, usually in these positions, black is aiming to go to f8 with the knight, and it is more or less solid. But here we just grab this h2 b8 diagonal with bishop f4. Well, and in fact, we use the fact that black bishop is not on d6. So knight f8, knight d2, knight g6, and bishop h2. And basically, we are controlling the e5 square. So in these positions, it is very important that we can play knight d5. It is probably the most important thing, because then we block this opportunity for black to trade all the pieces and make a comfortable draw. Now, in this position, we control e4 square very well. We control this square very well. Oops, I apologize. With bishop, knight, and rook, right? So there is no way for black to go 94. But it is a possibility for us to go 95, because we protect the e5 square with the bishop, with the pawn, and with the rook. And our focus is to go 95, and as you saw, c3, queen c2, just making sure that we are about to develop all our pieces, and later on we just double the rooks with rook e2 and rook e1. And with that way, we manage to keep the pressure. And when you double the rooks, you take the e file. And as long as we keep the knight on e5, we're always going to be better. So that's why I think bishop e7 is not smart approach. Definitely not recommended if you are learning French also for black. It's better to go bishop d7. And in general, if you can play active, it's always better to make active move rather than making passive moves such as bishop e7. So c5 is an active option. c3, the idea is to make d4 more solid and to have bishop c2 opportunity. So for example, if white goes castle, there is c4, and white needs to go back with the bishop to f1, well, after rook e1 check, or f1 or e2, and that's not really what we want. We want to go c3 to have the c2 square for the bishop. Knight c6, short castle, bishop e7, cd is also an option. It is probably more of an attempt to make a draw. So after knight d4, let's say knight d4, cd, bishop e7, knight c3, short castle, h3. Now, even though this position is very symmetrical, white is better because of active pieces again. And let's see how it's going to work. Bishop e6. Now, with h3, we stop bishop g4, and it is very important because now the c8 bishop does not have any active squares. So bishop e6, bishop f4, rook c8, and rook e1. As you see now, yes, the position is symmetrical, but let's analyze it together. Whose bishops are better? Obviously, white's. Black bishop on e6 and on e7 are not doing that much. And with our bishops, we can always put the bishop on e5, bring the queen to the game, and definitely white is the one who is putting pressure. And usually we are not against any trades here, because I mean, if black goes bishop d6, we actually will be happy to take on d6, but we can also play bishop e5 and keep the pressure. Well, we can also take, because this structure is simply better for white with queen d2. This bishop is better than this bishop, and we can just go rook e3 or rook e5 and double the rooks on e5. There is bishop e7, a logical move as well. Here we just go h3. The main point of h3 is that after bishop e3, black will not have knight g4. So we want to go bishop e3 to make sure that we have a strong d4 knight. So after short castle, bishop e3, and in my opinion, that white has already accomplished the key objectives. The most important thing is that now after knight d4, we will capture with the bishop, not with the pawn, because in this case, if we capture with the pawn, black will go bishop d6, grab this strong diagonal, and then we will not have any advantage. While if here knight d4, we will have time to go bishop f4, and again with this bishop e5 idea in the future, or even just by this bishop d6 we can capture. And again, because we covered this g4 square with the pawn, this bishop is better than this bishop. It is always very important to know that this position is better, and usually white is focusing on the e file in these positions, and yes, that's why white is better. And if short castle, then bishop e3. And now the most important is that, sorry, knight d4, we take bishop d4, and we have this beautiful bishops, and d5 pawn is weak, and white is playing risk-free game. And if black does not take on d4, then we just develop by knight d2, queen c2. Queen on c2 is really good. It's just a very solid square to put the queen at. And rook e1 is also very good. So the main point is to make sure that d4 knight is there, is solid, and after capturing on d4, we are ready to take with the bishop, because in this case it's already time to capture it with the bishop, or with the knight if the knight is on b3. So I think, in my opinion, this is already a great position for white, and a very playable position. So it's definitely possible to win a game here. And let's get into bishop e7, dc, forcing black to take on c5. Otherwise, we'll just keep the pawn with bishop e3 or b4, bishop c5, rook e1 check, bishop e6, and knight bd2. Now, as you see, black bishop on c5 is very active. So we just want to make sure that with knight b3 and bishop e3, we can eliminate the activity of this bishop. So short castle, knight b3, bishop b6, and bishop e3. Again, very typical idea in these structures. Trading the dark square bishops are usually very good for us. And here is the example. We get full access to d4 square here. And again, our pieces are simply better. d5 is weak. Bishop on d3 is better than e6 bishop. And later on, again, we want to put pressure on e-file with bringing the rook to e1. You can decide where the queen belongs. I think f3 is a very good square after knight f3-4, but also other squares are working extremely well. As long as your idea is to bring the rook to e1, you should be fine. So this is about the c5. The main move here is bishop d6. Well, just continuing the tendency of developing the pieces symmetrically, as we do. Short castle, and h3. Well, stopping bishop g4, because as we saw already a couple of times, it is important to make sure that this bishop is not going g4, h5, g6, and exchanging with our d3 bishop, because our d3 bishop is really the key in many positions and why we are better. So h6, definitely the most logical move. If your opponent makes all the symmetrical moves after h6, they also should go h6. After h3, they should also go h6, because stopping bishop g5. And now knight c3, very strong move. Now we are aiming to go knight b5. And now knight c6 is not an option anymore, because after knight b5, they will be forced to give us the d6 bishop. And d6 bishop is very valuable there. And Now you may ask, what about knight c6, knight b5, and knight b4? Well, this is not covered in the course, but because I think this is just too much, but I think we can just simply capture, and now I'm not sure if knight b7 works, but we can take on c8, and if knight c1, well, we are just repeating everything as you see. We will take on knight a7, and you can tell your opponent, well, time to repeat the same thing, right? So after knight a2, you will capture rook a2 and you will protect the knight. And if rook a7, then you just capture queen c1 and you will stay up a pawn. So it's a very funny line, but yeah, it's not really working for black. So that's why knight c6 is not a good option there. And c6 is the way to go, stopping knight b5 and also in a way making sure that d5 is very well protected. So rook e1, we have already achieved something that after knight c3, we changed the game. It's not symmetrical anymore. Already our knight is on c3 and the pawn is on c6. It's a bit different. So rook e8, our goal is to go knight e5 and bishop f4 and then go queen f3. And again, in these symmetrical positions, it is very important that we take control over the e5 square. And once we get the knight on e5 and if we manage to make sure that the knight stays there and we can just simply develop our pieces, then white is usually better. So rook e8, knight e5, very aggressive approach. And actually, I like this line because it's also very tricky and a lot of grandmasters lost here with black because they simply did not know the opening trick here. It's a very nice trap, so you will see what's coming. Knight d7, bishop f4, protecting the e5, and now there is queen c7, the most played move here, and knight f8. Knight f8 is the best move, but again, queen c7 is far more logical because you simply have 1, 2, 3, 4 attacking pieces, and I have 1, 2, 3 defenders. And it is hard to say how am I going to defend, because I really don't want to play queen e2, because then what's my next move after queen e2, right? Because all these pins is really not fun. So it seems very good for black to play queen c7. But now I have queen f3. Very strong move. Very good move and extremely nice trap. The idea is to simply go rook e2 and rook e1. But you may ask, what about knight e5? Aren't we just losing a pawn? No, in fact, it's all planned. D takes e5. And now the best move is rook e5. As you can imagine, it's already this bad that rook e5 is the only move. But let's understand first why bishop e5 is not working. And here the move is rook e5. Very strong move. Rook e5, queen g3. Now the only way to defend on on e5 is by playing knight d7, and we just take on h6. And now the only way not to get mated is either playing g6. After that, I will capture on g6 with the bishop. And well, again, rook e1 is the only move, so it's better to play rook e1 here. Check, takes, queen g3, rook e8 check. Very important to give this check immediately, forcing black to go knight f8. And we just take the queen, takes, and bishop f5. Very important move. Bishop f5 takes, bishop c2, and knight d2, just stopping at d4, d3, and white is completely winning. In fact, there are a lot of games like this. I believe that even I got a chance once to win like this, and it was definitely a very good feeling actually to win like this. But the opponent can also go rook e5, and here this is the strongest move, but it does not mean that it's equalized. We take bishop e5, take, and it is very important to play bishop f5. It is really, really important because if we do not go bishop f5, then black will go g6, and they will keep 2 bishops advantage with a very good pawn structure, actually. So it is very important to eliminate the c8 bishop, and in this case, it's already much easier to play as white. We are just an exchange up with a very good position. So we eliminate 2 bishops, and then again, the idea is very simple. You just double the rooks on e-file and play very easy game. Of course, now that we are upper material, it is good to exchange pieces, and bishop f5 is a very good example. So definitely, again, repeating one more time, very important to not allow g6 here, because after g6, to be honest, I would prefer black after g6. So that's why very important to go bishop f5, and bishop f5 is the only move that gives you a very good advantage. So this is the trick about queen f3 knight e5. It is worth to know that there are a lot of games like this. So definitely this is a very common trap that people fall for it. And I think that, well, it's common if you know as white, but all these moves are extremely logical as black. So it's definitely very possible that you will get this position. So now let's check knight f8. This is the best move. Black is aiming to go knight e6. And even though queen c7 is very tempting, queen c7 is not the best move. The best move is knight f8. And queen f3, knight e6, attacking d4 and f4 at the same time. But we are not afraid of giving up the bishop on f4. Now, knight f4 is an option. Knight f4, queen c7, a very natural move, again attacking on e5, but here we have knight h5, very strong move. Now taking on e5 is not an option because f6 is hanging, so knight h5, queen h5, again, now we protect e5, and after bishop e6, rook e3, we have a very good attack with rook e1, and in the future we can see how the things go, but technically rook e1 is must. We have full control over the e-file, and after rook e1, we can just go rook g3, threatening to take on h6. But I believe another idea, and probably a stronger idea, is to push f4, f5, forcing black bishop on e6 to go back. And then when bishop goes back, we can even push f6 and create a very strong attack. So definitely this is very good for white. And this is not really the way to play for black, in my opinion, because here the best move is queen c7. Now, this move is not easy to make. At first glance, it might seem that this is a blunder, but it's actually not. And bishop h6 is the reason why it seems like a blunder. But there is knight d4. Now, again, it is very important to remember that we are playing against humans, and all these moves are not easy to make. And even if they make, it is still very complicated. So after bishop h6, knight d4, knight d4, bishop e5, and bishop g5. Now, taking on d4 is not an option because we will go for bishop f6. And as you can see, after rook e1, bishop f6, rook e8 is a checkmate. And if you take with the g pawn, again, check here and queen h5, and it is impossible to stop queen h7 or queen h8 with the checkmate. So for that reason, the only move here is bishop d7, not an easy move to find, and here c3. And I believe that yes, computer gives an equal evaluation, but I believe that it is much easier to be white because our idea is very simple. We just want to go knight f5. The black king is weak. We already managed to capture one pawn on h6. Well, technically the h7 pawn. And we just want to go rook knight f5 and double the rooks on e-file. And I believe that it is much easier to be white here. Again, It's very important to remember that yes, computers in nowadays every position is equal, but this is what you need. It is hard to play for your opponent and not for yourself. So this is already an advantage, and I believe that all these moves are very hard to find. First of all, knight f8 is it might seem logical, but when you have queen c7, it is really tempting to play this move. And knight f8 is strong. Knight e6 is also a very good move. Knight e2, and it is also very tempting to take on f4, but it leads to a very bad position. So the best is queen c7, allowing bishop h6. Again, you need to have very deep understanding to understand that here your position is completely fine according to the computers. But again, from human perspective, it is definitely very hard to play as black since knight f5 is coming. So that's about the bishop d6 line. I believe that this is definitely one of the most common way how black is playing, and definitely this needs to be studied. And let's get to the main line with bishop d6. As you see so far, even though we played ed and went to a symmetrical position, the positions are really complicated, and it is not just an easy draw. So you will see the same when it comes to bishop d6 as well. So bishop d6 and c4. Now, the point of bishop d6 is that black wants to develop the knight on e7 time to time and then play bishop f5. So c4, avoiding all these symmetrical positions now and getting into a sharp middle game. So now let's start from dc. It's one of the main moves in this position, bishop c4, and it is actually quite surprising how many players went for knight e7, which is just losing because of knight g5, short castle, and queen h5. And now it is impossible to defend h7, f7 at the same time, and white is completely winning. So knight f6 is the move, and here a very important move, queen e2 check. Very interesting move, because I think it's the best way to play for the advantage. Even though we go for a queen trade, I believe that the endgame is really tough for black to play. So let's start with bishop e7, since I believe it's a bit passive move and there is not much to talk about. So let's cover this first. I think it's just loss of a tempo. So short castle, knight c3, developing a piece. Bishop g4, a logical approach, trying to attack on f3 and on d4. Rook d1, and now it is very important to understand that after h3, bishop h5, we will go g4, and after bishop g6, we will go knight e5. So for example, c6 trying to stop some d5. We can go h3 here, g4 here, and knight e5 with the idea to push f4, f5, trapping this bishop. So bishop e7 is not a great move. It is, as I said, it is just loss of a tempo for no reason. So queen e7, and let's cover king e7 first. I think king e7 is not very good move, because I think that it is still better for black to go for short castling, even though the queens are off the board. Short castle, bishop e6, a logical move, trying to stop the rook e1 check with knight g5 coming, because that's really what we want to do. So rook e1, again, following the idea of playing knight g5 and d5. King d7, only move. Bishop e6 takes, knight c3, and white's next move is knight e5 check, and we are simply way too ahead of the development. And for example, if knight c6, again, knight e5 check, and we force black to give up the bishop, and that's not really what black wants to do. And now knight d5 will create this strong e-pawn, so I believe knight g4 is probably better, and therefore h3, g4, and white is simply doing extremely well. So for that reason, it is not very good to take with the king. It is much better to capture with the bishop. And here, knight c3, just a developing move. You can also start with castle. I believe it's just the same. So knight c3, short castle, and a6. A key move. The idea of a6 is very logical. Black just wants to go bishop d6. But if you go bishop d6 now, then I can go knight b5, and I'll be able to take on d6 and get two bishops advantage. And in this position, it will be extremely helpful, because if I manage to capture on d6, I will play bishop f4 at some point, attacking the d6 pawn, and it will be very hard for you to defend on d6. So that's why a6 is a key move. Rook e1, bishop d6. Now black is achieving what they wanted. Bishop g5, attacking the f6 knight. Now I'm definitely happy to take on f6 and ruin black's pawn structure. So knight, I'm sorry. So knight b7 is the only move. Bishop b3. This is a very important move. I believe that probably this is the most important move to remember in this line, because now with bishop b3, we are preparing for black's next move, and we are not allowing knight b6 with the tempo, because now we can take and c4 is not hanging anymore. So b5, knight d5. Now we are creating a threat of knight d5, and after knight d5, I will give you some time to understand what is happening. First of all, after knight d5, we just want to take bishop f6 and ruin the pawn structure for black. And now basically, after knight d5, black can also not capture on d5, because we'll capture on d5, attack the rook, and with the next one, we'll go knight c6 with dominating advantage. So that's why bishop e7 only move, stopping knight d5 and also developing a piece. Now a very powerful move, a4, forcing black to make some sort of decision. Now let's start from the main move, b4. This is the most logical continuation, because, well, usually you are just like, okay, whatever, let me just push my pawn. But in fact, this is just losing. Knight d7, knight d7, knight d4. Now we want to take on d6, and after taking on d6, we'll be able to get rook e7, or bishop e7, rook e8, bishop d6 will be up pawn, and also b4 will be hanging. So let's say rook f8, a very logical move, knight d6, knight cd, rook e7, very strong move, attacking d7 and f7 at the same time, forcing black to take on e7 and bishop e7. And as you can see, black pawns are falling. We are going to be up a pawn, at least one pawn, with two bishops advantage, and I believe that the position is completely winning, and it's just a matter of technique whether you will win this game or not. So the move here is bishop e4. I mean, another move is bishop e4, but again here, white has full control over the position. And for example, rook a1 and bishop e7 are coming. a5 is an idea to fix the a5 pawn. So I think black simply has no time to go a5 and then to go rook e8, because we'll just take the e file. And if rook e8, you can technically take this and then go a5. And now this pawn is extremely weak. And once you go bishop c4 or bishop a4, well, in fact, now it is impossible to defend after bishop a4, the d7 knight, white is going to be completely winning. So even though the position seems like, oh, it's supposed to be a draw, and for example, if we don't go a5, and if we allow a5, if we allow black to play a5, then black is going to be completely fine. But after a5, white is completely winning. And well, technically, there is also bishop d5. So a lot of moves, all of them are fine. Rook e1 is also definitely better for white. So this position is just winning. So b4 is a very careless move. One of the moves is b takes on a4, bishop a4, knight b6. It's a good approach to the game. Bishop c6, forcing this trade. And now we want to capture on f6 again and damage the pawn structure. Now knight d5, and we take, and very important move here, bishop d2. The idea is to stop knight b4, because now if we allow knight b4 and knight trade, then the position will be equal, because now we keep the knight on c6. The knight is very strong. First of all, it is very important to understand that yes, the position is actually very close to be symmetrical, but what are the weaknesses? Our weakness is b2 pawn, and black's weakness is a6 pawn. Now, how black is going to attack our b2 pawn? With rook b8, right? Well, our knight on c6 is stopping rook b8. How are we going to attack on a6? With rook a4 or with rook a2, rook a1, right? Is there a way to defend a6 pawn? Absolutely not. So we are going to capture the a6 pawn and we will stay up a pawn. But again, it's very important to stop bishop d2, to play bishop d2 to stop knight b4, because after knight b4, it will be most likely a draw, because we will be forced to trade the knights, and then black will be able to attack to our weakness as well with rook b8, or they will just simply push a5 and will not have a weakness anymore. So definitely the most important move after b takes a4 line, I'm talking about, let's go back move by move. After b takes a4, definitely the most important line to take here, the most important move is bishop d2, because this is what, with this move, you keep your chances alive. And I think most likely you will stay up a piece, because the plan is very straightforward. Now there is another move, c5. I don't think that it's very likely to find such move, but well, maybe your opponent will play something like this. Bishop f6 is the best here. It is a bit strange looking move, but basically it gives us a pawn advantage with the direct game, so that's why we are going for this. So after knight f6, we just take on c5, bishop c5, and knight d3, attacking the c5 bishop and opening up the e file. And with the next one, we are just simply going to capture on b5, and we will stay up a pawn, even though black does have two bishops. But I believe that in this position, white is simply better. First of all, because they are up a pawn, and also b3 bishop is also not bad, because, for example, takes, knight b5. Now, for example, bishop f7 is a threat, knight d6 is a threat, and as you see, or knight e5 is a threat. So as you see, the bishop on b3 is also very useful. So definitely, not only we are up a pawn, but we also have some activity. So definitely a very good position to have. And that's about the queen e7 line. I mean, that's about the DC line. And I think, yes, it's just to summarize, I think there are some key points. One of them was the bishop d2, if you remember, not allowing knight b4. And now let's have a look and understand what is more likely that can happen in your game. I believe that even though bishop e7 is what I covered the most, it is possible that king e7 will also happen, but we should only be happy about it. Bishop e7, I believe that a6 and this position will occur. And yes, it is very important to remember that allowing knight b6 with the tempo is not acceptable, and allowing b5 with the tempo and bishop b7 is also not acceptable. So we should go bishop b3, prepare for b5, and then you go knight d5. And yes, as I mentioned, I think it's very likely that your opponent will go b4, and it leads to a losing endgame. It is very important to understand why this endgame is lost. As I said here, this diagram shows it very well. What are our ideas? So I really like a5 because after a5, we stop this knight from going to b6, and also the a6 is staying there as a weakness for the rest of the game. So definitely this endgame is not as easy as it seems from Black's perspective. They need to be super careful, and there are many ways for them to go wrong. Another move is c6. This is one of the main moves. The idea is to, well, just protect the d5 and have bishop c7 option after c5, but we still push c5, bishop c7, bishop d3, and now let's start from knight e7. It is one of the best ways to develop for Black. Short castle, and rook e1. I really like this move because now there are a lot of tricks here, and it is really easy for Black to blunder them. So first of all, bishop g4. It's losing because of, yes, you're right, bishop h7. And after king a7, knight g5, double attack, and we capture on g4, and it is completely winning. But there is another very logical move that is also losing the game, and that move is bishop f5. Technically, Black is usually happy with this trade in this type of scenarios. But here, rook e7, a very strong move. Now you may think, well, I don't have to take on e7 because of bishop f5. I can take on d3. And yes, you're right. But there is rook c7, very strong move. And after queen c7, queen d3, white is completely winning. So Black needs to keep taking the not the rook, but the bishop, and now the knight. But I just take on b7, and white is healthy pawn up. And we do not need to be worried about our rook. It will not get trapped because worst case scenario, we have this square, but it is better to play active. And now if queen c8, we will have rook c7. So we're just simply winning for white after bishop f4. So bishop f5 is also not working. And another move is rook e8. Well, this is actually not a bad move. I think it's a bit strange move because it allows bishop f5, bishop g5. So definitely we should go for that. Knight d7, queen c2, attacking h7, and also after queen c2, knight f8, knight d2. Black does not have this bishop f5 trade. I'm talking about, let's say, after f6, bishop h5. Bishop f5 is not possible because we really block it. So now in this structure, the main idea for white is to organize a play here with b4, b5, or with rook e1, sorry, rook e2 and rook e1. So white has managed to achieve the perfect setup here. And as you can see, Black's pieces are not very active. All of them are kind of in strange places. There is a pin as well. So definitely rook e8 is a bit strange. I mean, it is better than bishop f5 and bishop g4, don't get me wrong, but I really don't like this position from Black's perspective. And I think it's quite easy to play for white. Again, in this type of structures after c5, you will see many lines where our goal is to push b4, b5 as well and create a game there as well. So the move here is h6, basically stopping all these tricks with bishop g5, knight g5, bishop h7, you know, all these kind of things. And now h3, since Black went h6, they already want to go bishop g4. So now we start bishop g4, knight d7, knight c3, knight f6, and queen c2. And again, the position is very interesting, and our plans are very easy. As you see, e4 square is covered, so black cannot really go knight e4 and f5 at any point. And our plan is very easy. We just want to push b4, b5 again. But another idea is also bishop d2, rook e2, rook e1, doubling on e file. And also at some point on the right time, we can make this jump work. And once you get knight to e5, you can also even think about f4. And basically, you are just squeezing your opponent and taking the whole center and controlling as much space as possible. So this is the key of playing c5, that you control a lot of space, and you really want to get more with b4, b5, and also with doubling the rooks on e file and getting your knight on e5. As you can see, in fact, after bishop d2, if we are focusing only on bishop d2, rook e2, rook e1, there is no way for black to trade even one pair of rook very quickly. So it is not, basically just try to imagine how this rook will get to e8. It is very hard to imagine. Like, yes, technically you can go bishop e6 and queen d7. Okay, let me take some errors off so it will be more obvious for you. Sorry. Yeah. So yes, and rook a8. But then how you gonna trade pieces? It is really hard to imagine, and the bishop on e6 is not great. And also after queen d7, I will always have knight e5 with tempo, and you will be forced to go back. So this position is really good for us. We just want to do this. These are the main ideas that we should focus on. And most importantly, we are aiming to control as much space as possible and squeeze our opponent. So yeah, that's about knight e7. Let's cover knight f6. And queen e2 check. White forces the queens out. And now if bishop e6, we just go knight g5, queen e7, short castle. And now after rook e1, it is impossible to protect e6. And now black is forced to go back bishop d7, and that is just bad version of queen e7. That's why here this is not really good for black, and it's better to start with queen e7, takes, short castle. Now we want to give rook e1 check. So rook e8 is the best move by far. The idea that after rook e1 check, black will be able to go to f8 and not leave the h8 rook behind. So, but here we don't need to trade the rooks. So we don't need to give a check because we do not want to trade the rooks for a moment. We just go b4, taking the space as much as possible. King f8, a4, and after bishop g4, now black wants to take on f3 and damage our pawn structure, and we will be left with f3, f2, h2 pawns. But we are not going to allow that. With this very strong move, we are managing to achieve a very good and healthy position. Now, in this case, it's a bit different. Now, we are not fighting for the e file, but let me show you an example. As you can see, what are the ideas? But I think most importantly, it is necessary to understand that after f3, black cannot ever go knight e4, and knight c2, sorry. We control all these squares. We control e2, we control e3, we control e4, e5, and e1. So basically, yes, we allow black to take control over the e file in this case. But okay, so what? What you gonna do? I simply control all the squares, and my play here is much easier. And I'm going to push b5 and then knight b4 and create weakness on c6. So definitely we have a very rich game. And the good thing about the fact that you control all the squares is the fact that black will not be able to penetrate on e file. So at any time, if white wants, white can trade both rooks and will be left with, let me take some errors off. White will be left with the stronger side here because we are just the one who is pushing here. So definitely there is no need to be worried about giving up the e file. You just have to remember that you need to go f3 to stop knight e4 in the future and to control all these squares. So definitely knight d1 is a very important move to remember. And yes, that's about the c6 line. And I believe that this was it. Yes. And so I think the most important here to remember that after 97, we need to go short castle and rook e1, because now you stop all this bishop f5, bishop g4. First of all, again, this you can use for a classical game as well. But if you are using this for a blitz game, you definitely want to play rook e1 because it is very likely that your opponent can go bishop f5 or bishop g4, because both these moves are just extremely natural. And even if they go h6, it is important to go h3, stop bishop g4. And I believe that it's a very simple game. You do not really need to memorize all the details here, because you just need to understand that, okay, I'm going to put my knight on c3, my queen on c2 is good, and then your plan is to go b4 and b5, and you want to control the e file with knight e5. So I believe that this is the key, especially, well, to be honest, even in classical game as well, but in blitz, it's even better when you know the ideas, you know what you are supposed to do, and it's a very clear game plan. So definitely this is the case where the lines are not very straightforward, and there is not much to memorize. It's more about understanding the positions. So there is also knight f6 move, which is the main line here. It's a common move, of course, just defending d5 pawn. So c5, I believe that this is the most challenging for black. Bishop e7, and I think we have had this position in the candidates tournament, which shows that ED line is definitely a very modern, and I believe that Hikaru played against Nijat Abbasov with queen a4 check. And I believe he won the game, but it was a tough game. But you can definitely check it out. Queen a4 is also an interesting move. But here I'm covering bishop d3, short castle. And this is the main position that is happening after knight f6. Queen a4 was kind of a novelty. So here, b6, a logical decision. Black wants to create some space. Otherwise, we will just go bishop e3 and protect this and make it stronger. So b6, bishop e3, again, quite a logical decision. Now we protect c5. So takes, and knight g4. A very direct approach. This is the main move. Let's cover bishop g4. Again, a very logical move, but usually the point of this move is that your opponent needs to go h3 and then g4. Otherwise, this pin will be here forever. But in this case, the knight is on b1. So we just develop knight to d2. Now, we can simply develop our queen to a4, and black is unable to take on f3 because we'll just capture it with the knight, and we'll have 2 bishops advantage, and with this strong pawn we will just dominate the position. That's why bishop g4 is not a great move. Now, what's our idea? Our idea is that we want to push b4 and basically keep this bishop bad. Oh my god, I'm sorry. So keep this bishop bad, push b4, and make this pawn chain very strong, and at some point use the d4 square as a forepost. So knight g4, sorry, so a5 is also, the main idea is to stop b4 push, which is actually logical. And now rook e1. Now, all white wants to do is to go knight bd2 and queen c2, and I believe that it's a very good position here, and it is very simple to play here as white. All what you have to do is to make sure that you do not lose the c5 pawn, and you keep under pressure this bishop, because once you get control over, once you get to play bishop d4 somehow, then you will be better. So for example, if knight a6, you can just simply capture even on a6, and I believe that this position is simply better for white because of this pawn, and you can later on go rook c1, knight d4, or knight e5 with the help of bishop d4, and white is better. So the main move here is knight g4, and I believe it's quite logical because black is attacking the bishop, and if black manages to capture on e3, then they will capture on c5. So that's why here bishop d4 is a very logical move, but it's not great. So I just wanted to show you that knight c6 is this is what black wants. They will be able to capture on d4 eventually, and then c5 will be hanging. That's why here we go bishop f4, a very strong move. Now, yes, we do allow bishop c5. If black does not take bishop c5, then we can just go queen c1 or queen c2, more likely queen c2, because first of all, after queen c2, we protect c5 and we attack on h7. And the same, well, at least something similar is happening here. After bishop c5, we just capture on h7, a very nice tactical resource, and king h7, check, again, double attack, attacking h7 and c5 at the same time. The king needs to go back, queen c5. Now c7 is hanging, so the only and the most logical move here is knight a6, attacking the queen and protecting c7 pawn at the same time. I don't think it's very hard to find. Some people, I think, did not play it, but I think it's quite easy. And queen c6, attacking the rook and forcing black to go rook b8, and now we go back queen c1. Now you may ask, why not queen c1 immediately? That will be a very good question, because here we allow c5. But here, after queen c6, rook b8, queen c1, c5 is not an option at the moment. And as you can see, there are a lot of ideas here for white. And f4 bishop is extremely strong, and we want to just bring rook e1. I would say our main idea is to go rook e1 and bring the knight to b3, covering these 2 squares with the knights. And it is, I believe that if we look at the position, we have more harmony than black. If we see these pieces, those are really weirdly placed. It is hard to say what these knights are doing in general, and our game plan is very easy. We just want to control the dark squares and play on these 2 pawns, on these 2 weaknesses. So I think that this position is quite better for white. It is very playable, definitely. At some point, we can also force black. Let me take some errors off. To play, we can also play h3, knight f6, and pin the knight at some point if we want to. But again, I think the main idea is this taking under control the c5 square and d4 square at the same time. And later on, we can bring the queen and the rook and put pressure on this pawn, and then on this pawn with rook f1. So I think overall the French defense and after ED is quite interesting, and I'm sure that a lot of people don't know what to do against French as white, because it is really a complicated opening with very difficult positions. And so here I am thinking that what usually people want is something very easy and not very hard to understand. So, for example, these structures are, I think, for most people are very hard to understand. That's why I was aiming to find something that is not very drawish, but also very interesting, and I would say very fresh to play. Because after ED, a lot of people think that you want to make a draw, but in fact you don't. And I think it's also, if you are playing against a French player, I mean, a player who is playing French defense, usually ED is not the line what they cover the most. So definitely that also played a huge role on my decision to cover ED. So I think it's not drawish, and as you saw, there are a lot of interesting lines. And the main idea here is usually that you want to take as much space as possible. So even though it's symmetrical, a lot of positions are very hard to play as black. So I think you liked what I recommended, and I'll see you in the next chapter. Thanks for watching.